Welcome to Bump Set Chat, the podcast where volleyball professionals come on and share their stories, experiences, and advice. And today from Michigan, I have Erin Virtue. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to having a good conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to come on. And the way we start things off is a few random questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So you're driving in the car. What song comes on the radio that brings out your inner singer?
Ooh, right now, anything on the Wicked soundtrack.
All right.
Yeah, I love a good musical and I love Wicked.
Excellent. All right. Most interesting place you've ever played a volleyball match in?
Wow. As a player, I would say I traveled to Italy with Bring It Promotions when I was in college, and we had this really cool tournament in the Sibillini Mountains, which is like on the East Coast, closer to the Adriatic. And we played on indoor volleyball courts, but outside. So like in the
Oh,
mountains and
wow.
under the stars in some spaces. And it was super cool. It was a little weird to get used to the wind
Yeah.
indoor playing on like a hard surface, but you couldn't get over the view. It was amazing. They don't
Very
host that tournament anymore, but there's a lot of nostalgia with that one.
nice. Very cool. All right. Final random question. If they played intro songs for coaches, what would your intro song be?
Oh, I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, actually. It would probably be something Gaelic, so something Irish,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe at the tune of like shipping up to Boston or something like that.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, hey, welcome to the podcast. Let's start, at the beginning. Where are you from?
So I grew up in St. Charles, Illinois, which is about an hour west of Chicago.
Okay. And when did you first discover volleyball?
My big sisters played. My one a little more than the other, but they played. I tried out for sixth grade volleyball. I got cut actually sixth grade, but I started playing in seventh grade with my
Okay.
middle school team.
And now, the career you've had playing and coaching, what is the hook volleyball has on you?
Good question. I think for me, it's a really fun like dance with your teammates.
Mm-hmm.
So just to be able to try to figure this out. I was never really into individual sports as a young athlete or young just kid playing. I liked playing with people. I liked the idea of being part of a team, and I think the challenge of having that orchestra play together is a really fun one as a coach.
Nice. And now, for you, you played club. How important was playing club to being able to, enable your skill set to bring you to that next level of playing in college and, and coaching?
Yeah, for me, club, especially early on, I was playing four or three sports like through middle school and then high school, and it allowed me to just play all year long.
Yeah.
So that was the best part of my development, I think, was just investing, and my parents were able to, help afford that and invest in me as a young athlete and something I really loved to pursue. So club volleyball was a big one. I played for a couple different clubs growing up, but really settled at sports performance where we trained a lot, and I think that was something that I was really excited to do. I loved practicing when I played. I loved that in volleyball the most of any sport that I played, and so really stuck with it. But that was a big part of my journey.
All right. And you just mentioned about playing, multiple sports. When Eric showed you was on, he was talking about, tennis was his sport. How
Mhm.
important is it for athletes to, branch out and play a little else?
I think it's a great thing. I think that there's like I really loved that as part of my athletic experience, and not only just for skill and just how you learn how to move and do all the things as like motor learning might teach you, but I think more you have different cultures in different sports, and you have different things that you may learn or get tested in various ways from being part of I was on a softball team and there was just a different rhythm to that game,
Mm-hmm.
or on a basketball or soccer. Those are my three other sports I played more competitively. And, for me, I could probably cherry pick something from each of those just as a culture. And
Mm-hmm.
then certainly a lot of things to be learned on, like learning how to throw in softball or baseball, to just being able to attack and serve and do different things as a volleyball player. So there's a lot of symmetry, and I think it's great for a growing athlete if they have interest and it's fun for them. I would certainly recommend trying to explore different types of sports.
All right. So, Jojo Persico has been on a while ago, and,
Yeah,
she
love her.
sent me a few questions for, they're sprinkled in
Oh,
here.
great.
So, one of them, she said, at one point you were one of the top players coming out of club. And, what made you choose, University of Illinois to play at?
Oh, that's a good question, Jojo. Yeah, I was fortunate to be recruited by lots of different places, including Michigan. They didn't need a setter actually when I was looking to go. My sister played in the Big Ten. She played at Ohio State and was a setter, and I loved going to her games, and that was a big part of my recruiting process. I'd go and watch her. With my family, and then I'd get to know the environment. And at that time, we weren't Big Ten wasn't on TV as much, but or maybe even at all. But going to the games was so fun. It was not too far to drive for anyone in my family, and I really wasn't thinking to be in state when I was going through my recruiting process. Really looked a lot of places around the country, but when I went and visited Illinois, it just really felt like home, and I had a really good relationship with the coaches there. The setter coach at the time, Ann Cordes, she is now running Kiva with her family, but she was somebody that was a great recruiter, but also believed in me, and was a small setter like I was. And I loved that they had a really dedicated setter coach, as I was a setter and really wanted to just grow in my craft.
All right. And back then, were you guys running 6.2s, or were you running a 5.1?
Only 5'1". I
Nice.
actually I ran a 6'2". I was setting and hitting in high school. When in my high school team, we had a lot of different setters and different compilations of things there, but in college it was only a 5'1".
All right. And now, if you could go back to, freshman Erin, what advice would you have for her?
Freshman in college.
Yes.
I really enjoyed my freshman year. I think for me, it was the first time I was really challenged in a new role. So um, I think for me, it was just embracing any role that came my way and keep fighting for when things get hard, just keep working through it. I think I think as freshmen, when people come from high school or athletes come from high school into college, you're really thrown into where now everybody's good, and you were the highly recruited player or that, and then you get into college, and I think staying patient, enjoying the process, and then just keep trying to get better. And I think that was something that I thought I did a good job with that, but that's a good reminder for Erin circa freshman year in high school, is just stay about the journey and make sure you just keep controlling what you can control, and that's your improvement and development.
All right. And then I saw in your last year you went down with an ACL injury. How was, that must have felt devastating. What helped, or who helped you get through that? And, what did you find to take your focus away from that into something else?
Yeah, I was injured actually right before the Big Ten started in my senior year. So it was early on in the season. I was our senior setter, starting setter and captain, and it was something that, obviously you don't ever really expect an injury. And so, but I think our team really didn't expect it. And something I actually took from that as a coach was you just never know when that's going to happen. And so you want to make sure that your next player up is always ready to
Yeah.
go. They're chomping at the bit. Your team doesn't miss a stride. And I was, not that our freshman at the time wasn't ready to go, but I think she was, it was just not, it was unexpected in that way. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure that as a coach, I'm always developing my lineup in that way. Um, but who supported me? That was a huge army of people. I was devastated. I'm sure I didn't handle that, well at all. I think it took me a little while to really get myself to a place where I could help my team in any kind of way that they could need me from the sidelines. But my coaching staff was amazing. At that point, one of my assistants was Jen Flynn. She's the head coach at Ohio State, and Mary and Kevin Hambley, who are at Stanford now. But they were new, and they were amazing support for me as new assistants on that staff, and Don Harden, my head coach. my family. Just you really need a ton of support for an injured athlete, especially that when you're also transitioning. That's it. That was that
Right.
last year for me at college. So that whole year really needed support and found it in family and my coaching staff and of course my teammates.
All right. And more on a brighter side, what were some of the highlights you look back now that you take away from your whole college experience?
So in college, I think, especially learning as a coach now, but I love that I played like every role possible. I think it's not the easiest when you go through it, but I was a starter, I was a non-starter, I was a serving sub, I was a DS. I just came in and played defense, served and played defense. I was the leader. I was the injured player. I think that is something that what a great experience to just run the gamut of all of those things, especially now as a person that is leading a program and talking with athletes about roles and role clarity and how to be good for your team in a space where none of those roles are easy. They all have different challenges, they have pros and cons and all the way through it. And I'm so grateful that I got to actually live that experience as a young player. And like I said, it wasn't easy, but it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, excellent. And then after college, I saw you got to train with the national team. What was that experience like?
Oh, it was unreal. I was fortunate to get a call, and I was rehabbing my knee as we talked about, and I got a call to go train. A lot of the athletes were overseas, and they needed a training group to train some of the girls that were going to be on that year's World Championship team, to perform. And so I was so fortunate to be able to be in that gym. We trained in Colorado Springs back in that day, ahead of the 2028 Olympics. But that was a dream of mine, is to wear red, white, and blue. And I played as long as I could, as long as my knee would hold up.
Yeah.
And I asked a ton of questions. Jenny Longping was the head coach, and I loved learning from her. She had a really good tactical mind and stretched me and asked really good questions. And so um, Tom Hogan was an assistant, and I bothered him with a lot of questions too. But I really fortunate to be able to do that for my last year of actually competitively playing.
Coaching. What made you get involved in coaching? What is the hook?
Yeah. So when I was injured in college, I think that was the first time I was trying to help a team by being on the sidelines, without being out on the court. And for me, I found a lot of joy in that. I didn't expect it,
Hmm.
but I found joy in that, and trying to either motivate a teammates. And I wasn't coaching technically, but I was just trying to support and in college. And I liked trying to figure out how to be good at this game. It's always evolving, it's always changing, and so I just threw myself at it. And I was studying my master's and coaching my first year, actually coaching at Loyola Chicago, and studying education, learning about being a teacher, and then also learning about being a coach. And so for me, I was at this fork in the road of like teaching and coaching, and where did I want to spend my time? And obviously we all know how that ended. I chose coaching, and really haven't turned back. I've just tried to learn as much as I can as I go through my career.
Nice. And some people don't realize how hard of a career it is to be a coach, whether it's the grind of volunteering first or assistant coaches
Yeah.
and the not the unstableness of it. It could be 1 year here, next year you're off somewhere else. It's, if you're, as growing up into your adult years and trying to, whether it's, starting a family relationship, that's a lot to try to balance trying to be a coach.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, I think like anything that's a big passion, it's so much more than just a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
It's going to be in your blood, and it's something if you want to try to be great at anything, you're hopefully there's some kind of element of passion in there and something that you're striving for greatness.
Yeah. And prior to landing at Michigan, what was your sort of path, to get there?
Yeah, so my first job was I was a graduate assistant at Loyola Chicago. I was there just 1 year before I got the call to go over to the University of Cincinnati. And I had a great opportunity there to just honestly, I dove into a pool of cold water. I was our first assistant recruiting coordinator. offensive coordinator. I ran a lot. I helped run a lot of practice and practice planning. Reed Sunahara really did a wonderful job just taking a leap of faith. And he wanted somebody that had a high level of playing experience. So I was there for 4 years. I had no idea what I was doing. I learned on the fly a lot. I had to learn how to scout, how to code, how to teach, how to actually code the statistics and learn that process. And that was awesome for me. I Reed was a leader that wasn't going to hold my hand. He expected me to, figure that out. And
Hmm.
that was a really great way for me to really learn and how to recruit, how to talk to people, how to evaluate talent, how to organize recruiting. I learned a ton on that job. And then so much so, we did a great job. We had a good team, a couple Big East championships there. And then Mark Rosen had called from the University of Michigan. They had a vacant spot in their recruiting coordinator and offensive coordinator, setter trainer, which really fit the niche I was falling into. And so I went over to the University of Michigan as an assistant coach. I was there 5 years, had a wonderful career at Michigan and as an assistant, fell in love with Ann Arbor so much it brought me back
Yeah.
many years later. But I absolutely loved it. And at that time I was also coaching a lot within USA Volleyball and youth and junior national teams. So I found myself in the summers working with what is now or was U20 and U18 national teams as an assistant coach and then a head coach, and just really enjoyed again learning. And I found myself in the USA gym as much as I could, just trying to learn from the staff that was there, and they're really open to um, young coaches coming and asking questions. And I ended up going to Northwestern as an associate head coach after that. That brought me a little closer to family. And then also in 2017, that was a nice chance for me to then go work with the national team. I did that with Northwestern for 2 years, and then through 2024, as we know, through the Paris Olympics.
Yeah.
So 8 years with the national team, the last two with Michigan as the head coach. So kind of balancing both.
Nice. And those years at Cincinnati and Northwestern and in the USA gym, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned that you brought to Michigan
Let's see. When I was an assistant at Michigan or brought to Michigan as the head
as a
coach.
head coach?
Yeah, so I think honestly it was how you might want to balance a staff and all the pieces that are involved. By the time one of the biggest things I was really intriguing when I went to Northwestern is I just was involved in a little bit more. I as an associate head coach, Shane Davis was the head coach at that time. But I was involved more on the academic and admissions side. I learned a lot more about that. I learned as we were building a program, he was new to that program. That was huge for me as I took over as a head coach someday, if I was planning to do that any day, of what that meant, what that looked like. What does your first year look like when you have a new program, and how do you build a culture from scratch? And so there was a lot of pieces when I had gotten to Cincinnati and when I got to Michigan as an assistant, those programs were very set in stone. The coaches had been there a long time. There was a storied bit of success already. So Northwestern was a cool learning opportunity for me as a coach, and watching Shane go through that and what the joys were and what the challenges were. But there was a ton of opportunities to learn.
All right. And I had met Ulmer on a while ago, and he talked about, when you're not the head coach, you're that sort of fun uncle. And now when you become that head coach, like at Michigan, you're no longer that fun uncle. You're sort of like, got to be
Sure.
the stern parent, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of things that, as a head coach, you have to wear many, many hats. And I think the thing that I aspire to be is at the end of the day, I just want to be myself. I'm not trying to be, the coach that was before me, or, some of the other amazing coaches around at Michigan and other sports, but I just want to make sure that I am who I am, and genuine and honest with my athletes. But yeah, there are certain elements where I have to make sure I hire a staff that can relate to the athletes if they want to talk to an assistant, or someone in our sports psych or something about anything, that there might be a layer that they're not coming to me at first, but they know that they always can, or at least I hope that they know that I'm always, always there for them with whatever they need. But there are certain things that our assistant coaches will be miraculous at helping. And I was an assistant for a very long time. So I have no ego about that if there's a layer that they want to talk to with an assistant first. But having a diversity of thought is a really big one when
Yeah.
you're hiring staff.
Absolutely. You talked about culture. When you come in as a head coach, you have your own mindset of what your culture you want it to be. And, with your experience at, USA Volleyball, they brought in, or you guys brought in somebody to talk culture.
Sue Enquist,
Yeah,
yeah.
Sue Inquest. Yeah. And, so now when you come to Michigan as the head coach, how, did you have much of a change from the culture standpoint you wanted, or, was something already there?
Yeah, there's always the culture is always there. It's how you mold it, but the way I think of it is it's in everything that you do. It's not just words you put on a wall, or something that you talk about in a team meeting at the beginning of the season, but it is how we treat each other. It is how we work. It's how we communicate. It's how we show up for one another. It is in every fiber of what we do. So, to me, it's really important that you're living it before you're just talking about it. And they have to be married together. And so that is just, I think just being, for example, just being having gratitude when we get off the bus, that we're thanking the bus driver for getting us there safely. We're polite to flight attendants when we're flying, to when we flew to Europe just now. And we're just it's who we are. And then how we want to show up when it's competition time. How do we manage roles? But culture is just managed in all of that. And that has to be led and exemplified by me and my staff,
Yeah.
first and foremost.
All right. And now, these freshmen that are coming in, there's a lot of weight on their shoulders, especially playing volleyball. You're a fall athlete, you're hitting the ground running. Maybe
Yep.
it's a different city, a different country, college. How do you keep them in a healthy mindset? And let's not also forget that these players that are coming in, they're starters. They're, from their club, and now they have to, accept whatever, maybe they're coming off the bench.
Yeah, I think freshman it's a really fun thing for us to onboard a new athlete, and whether that's a freshman, a transfer, but it doesn't matter where they come from, but just onboarding a new athlete. And we're really intentional about that. Certainly as the head coach, I have a huge part in that. But teammates are a really big part of that too. And then even teammates' moms and dads, and the incoming players' moms and dads. But that's a whole other part of just onboarding an athlete, is getting their family and understanding what that looks like too. And I get really excited when the parents make their connections as well. But teammates, we have a committee of athletes on our team, that work with really closely with one of our assistants, but certainly the rest of our staff is involved as an onboarding committee. But those athletes, we have some underclassmen, some upperclassmen. They'll meet with our athletes. They'll help them when they get to campus. But they're gonna know things that I'm not. They live in the dorms, or they
Yeah.
have, and I've never lived in the Michigan dorms. Nor will I ever live in the Michigan dorms, or any dorm, hopefully. But
Yeah.
they know those things. They know what it costs to do a load of laundry, or how that function works. So that's a huge part of just, you forget sometimes. Yes, you need to know the systems, and you need to know volleyball. You need to make your class schedule, but there's all these cracks in life. Where do you go get your hair done? How do you get a dentist appointment? Or just stuff like that, that just living here, whether that's a new staff member or a new athlete, I think it's a really fun thing to bring them into our world, and help them feel comfortable.
All right. And speaking of your world at Michigan, how what how do you communicate, or what do you communicate to those players that you want to come play at Michigan? What is the pitch?
Yeah, well, we love recruiting athletes to Michigan. I think this is an exceptional place to have a world-class education and a world-class athletic experience, and also have a great life outside of those things. Ann Arbor's an amazing city. the culture around athletics and the university of just this social part of it is so fun. So you really don't have to make any sacrifice when you're coming here. That's a place that, for families, they can know that their athletes are taken care of in a safe Ann Arbor and in a place that is going to just have a bubble around them in college. But we love it's for me, it's a really genuine place to have to kind of sell because it would have been a place I would have loved to go to school. It has a wonderful kind of campus atmosphere. We're going to support our athletes with great financial resources, in this new age of NCAA athletics. And so that's a place too where it's just you don't have to settle.
Yeah. Nice. And during the season, are there any games circled that whether it's senior night or just first practice or first home game that really you look forward to the most, or is it the coach answer? Every game is
Yeah,
important.
well, of course, yeah, every single opportunity is a chance for us to kind of show what we've got. And, at the end of the season, when the NCAA is looking at, the selection for the tournament, and every match will matter. And so, you want to make sure that you really tackle those as we go. Certainly at Michigan, we have rivalry matches that are super fun. Senior night is always a special one where we get to honor the girls that are leaving the program or done with their eligibility. Um, I always love when we have our Maize and Blue scrimmage at the beginning of the year before the season kicks off. That's a fun one where everyone plays and the fans really get to know our players and the incoming. And, there's always a lot of butterflies putting the jersey on for the first time in the
Yeah.
fall. But there's a lot of really cool things. We're going to actually play on an island for our exhibition match, one of the islands in Michigan,
Wow.
called Mackinac Island. We'll play there for an exhibition match. So that'll be a fun thing to just go to a different part of Michigan. Not every state has an island,
Hmm.
so we want go to one of ours. We have a few up in northern Michigan, so that'll be a really cool way to also bring in community and do some other things. And but yeah, we have a really great schedule. Our non-conference schedule is set up to push us and really help us fine tune kind of who we are and give us some nice challenge before we get into the Big Ten.
Nice. And do you have any pregame rituals or superstitions that you every day I gotta have this? Like when I talked to
Yeah,
Shannon Windsor, who was Team Canada's coach,
yeah,
she
I
needed
know
her
her well.
Diet Coke. That was her
Ah,
thing.
yeah. Yeah. You know what? I usually will have a coffee, but it's for me, well, that's like every day, but I really just I go through the game plan, as far as like the match rhythm and just kind of look through that some strategy that, I think we got in a rhythm with the Olympic staff is just understanding how we want to maybe make what our cadence might want to look like if we as we prepare for not only the opponent and what we think adjustments might be. Um, but yeah, I don't have a lot of like superstitious things because if what I don't want is if I can't do the
Mm-hmm.
thing, then it throws me off.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty casual when it comes to like expectations of superstitions.
All right. And now, for your, when you're recruiting or looking for players, where's your sort of go-to? Do is it the tournaments, like the club tournaments, the AAU and the USAV,
Hmm.
final nationals, or are you going, looking at videos or relying on players to send you stuff, or it's all of the above?
Yeah, so in recruiting, our staff really likes to see it live. And now we have such an opportunity. Sure, we can watch some video, and certainly if it's someone that's further away or an area we're not seeing very much or overseas, we're gonna watch some film. And that's always a good thing. I always encourage players to, get some film together or chunk it up, so that, that's easy to send to coaches because maybe we didn't get to see you. That might be the first thing we get to see, and then we go see a live match. Certainly, we get the biggest bang for our buck if we're at a large tournament, a qualifier, or nationals. Um, I love to go to practices. I think I learn the most about a player when I'm at their training session of how they're going to work and how they're going to respond to failure and work through things with their coaches, how they're coached, and also I learn the environment that's gonna are they going to be in a good enough environment to then, make a nice impact for them before they get to college.
Yeah.
So, those are obviously, you don't see as many athletes at one time when you're at a practice, but that's certainly the best way for me to evaluate somebody.
All right. And and these club players, you see, with your involvement with USA Volleyball and just recruiting players, and you're seeing a lot of talent coming through. Is there something you wish the clubs would focus on more, or something that they should, not do that really would help benefit these players in a club when they get to, when they get to your level?
Hmm, I think that changes, but overall, I think the level of serving can continue to increase, I think in the junior and club area. And then I think in college too, but that's going to help our passers. It's going to challenge them, but that's why it'll make it better. But I see a lot of times the gyms, maybe the runway isn't long enough to have
Yeah.
a great approach, but I think we can still get a nice level of serving or get creative with what the serve approach looks like. But I would love to continue to see that elevate in the club game. Again, I think that's going to then challenge our passing, and then our passing will have to elevate as well. So I think that's something it's not as difficult of a skill to learn and to teach. And so I think that level of the serving can continue to increase.
All right. And then adding on to that, the international players, the international young players you see, are you seeing something they're doing different? Like I always hear about, they're just more well-rounded. You don't have the focus. Oh, you're a middle. You don't have to worry about passing. Is that
Yeah.
something you wish that would carry over onto, this side of the pond? Is just focus on not labeling, oh, you're a middle. Don't worry about it. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think some of that is just the regulation around
Yeah.
substitutions, but we have an incoming freshman from Turkey, and she's a middle, and she's somebody that yes, she has had to learn how to play defense and serve, and a lot of middles maybe don't have that experience as much if they're subbed out in the States. And so even if that's a choice that coach is making in the match in the States, whatever it might be for an attacker to be in a back row, not playing the back row, then I would hope that that player is still being trained, Monday through Friday or whatever those club practices
Yeah.
are. Um, Ahead of time for those. We'll make those choices at Michigan too if a player needs to make a sub, if we need to make a sub in a space, but we'll always train them they'll train every day in that skill to make sure they're making up for those gaps. And then overseas, yeah, they just don't have as much choice because their subs are more restricted. So you will see, middle is a great example of just being able to serve and play defense at a higher level than somebody in the
All
States.
right. And now, Jojo question time, since we're
Yeah,
in this.
great.
So, she wanted me to ask you your feelings about today's NIL, and, why can American players get NIL but not the foreign unless they do it in their own home country?
Yeah, I think that's a really sticky question. I think that's something that is being navigated, and it's constantly changing, of the interpretation of what that means to be able to receive NIL where you're working for it. And then even now with the new rev share, I think there's a lot of different interpretations of what does it mean to work and have that base because you're here on a student visa.
Right.
So I think that's bigger than just college athletics, but that's looking at how the visas are written. But those student visas and how they were drawn up, and especially for an athlete, they may have to be looked at to be able to, what does it mean to be a college athlete, and is there earning potential there? So I think that's a space that's a little bigger than college athletics.
Yeah.
It's more of just, again, in the visa and then in the different rules within the law. So I think that's a piece I would agree there, to have a team that has, we'll have this fall two international players on our team, one from Canada and one from Turkey. And I always want, with a roster of 18, the opportunities aren't going to be exactly the same for
Yeah.
everybody. But it always is interesting to have where you can have 16 players earning and two that are not, or the rules are different.
Yeah.
But the rules are different right now. So those are things that we abide by for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Because I was curious. Like I had Nick McRae and Alan Knipe on, and they had Moni last year,
Yeah.
international player. He could, just what he did last year for the game, and I wonder if NIL was a little bit different. Would we have lost him to go back and play pro if there was, some more opportunities for him? It was just
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's no, that's definitely true.
yeah. And now, for you, you part of the U.S. women's team, coaching staff. How did that, what was your path to that?
Yeah. So at the end of 2016, the Olympics in Rio in 2016, there was a lot of turnover on the staff, as there is normally after an Olympics. The Olympic staff typically has turnover. And so at the end, that was the end of my first year at Northwestern. And I'd started to get to know Karch a little bit through my time with the youth and junior national team. And so he has always done a great job of connecting in with college coaches on who's been good in the conference and who should he look out for. And so he asked to chat with me at the end of 2016, at the end of the season. And I had my list of Big Ten players and who was good, and he called, and I thought that's what he wanted to talk about, but he wanted to talk about the job, to fill on his staff. And I dropped the phone. I was so excited and just like a little bit shocked that he wanted to discuss that with me. And we chatted over the next month, and as he looked to build his staff, I was lucky to be asked to be part of it, starting in the early part of 2017. And yes, went from 2017 through the Tokyo Olympics and
Yeah.
then the Paris Olympics, was part of his staff. And the national team staff it's comprised of lots of different ways that, because the season falls in the summer. Um, I worked with Northwestern for the first two seasons, and then I was actually part of the USA as a like NTDP, and transitioned from high performance to NTDP, and was did a lot of work with them for the next 6 years.
Okay, very cool. And speaking of Karch, another JoJo question.
Mhm.
What was it like to work with Karch? The all-time Michael Jordan of our sport, and what was his non-negotiables for the USA players and staff?
Oh, well, Karch is amazing. I'm a huge Karch fan. I'm lucky to call him a friend. He's one of my closest friends, and he is somebody that will be in my life forever. I love him, and I learned a lot from him. And fortunate to be able to be in a space with somebody that is that elite at what they do, and thinks and learn and wants to learn all the time. Um, I think non-negotiables is just showing up and working. He's somebody that is dedicated to the 100th degree of what he does. But that is the expectation that we're trying to be the best in the world that's very understood if you're part of staff with Karch and a team. But everyone understood that. And if you're not pulling your weight, he just won't understand that. We're trying to do this. We're trying to do really, really difficult things. And so you don't even have to for me, he never had to ask. I knew and I understood the assignment of what that meant. And so you work at it. And, certainly he wants everyone to be able to have balance, and all of the rest is just as important as the work. But um I think that's something that you feel from Karch if you're working with him in his space is, you want to be great, he wants to be great, and he's going to lead by example in
Yeah.
that space too.
All right. And then, one more JoJo question.
Hmm.
So she said, when you first got asked to, she talked about you had a talk with her team, her squad, at St. John's, and
Hmm.
she said you talked about a story about, when you got picked to go, chosen, or part of the coaching staff. You mentioned in the beginning, like you were like, what do I have to offer at this level? Here's these top talented athletes. And it's like, how do I coach them? What do I have to say?
Sure. Yeah, there's I think it's very human to have some imposter syndrome, of like holy crap, I'm in this like, wonderful environment. I think amazing person I got to work with was Feluca Akinradenwo, was one of the best middles in the world. She will go down in history as that. And at that time, she was, in my opinion, the best slide hitter in the world. And I was working with our offense, and I'm like, how the heck am I going to make Feluca better at the slide? Like, she's the best. And you're not talking about just you're good at what you do. You are phenomenal. And she's asking, how can I improve this? And like for me, what I did in that scenario, certainly there was some feelings about how was I prepared enough, but what I learned in that is if I didn't know the answer, I would go figure it out. I would go study it. I would watch tons and tons and hours of film. I'd whether with her or by myself or with somebody else or talk to other coaches about ways to get better. But that was a cool thing for me to learn as starting out with USA and actually I hope throughout my whole career is that I always need to be getting better and going and trying to learn how to coach something better, how to give feedback better. Um, what are the best players in the world doing? Am I coaching it that way? Why are they doing it different than I am, or that I have? So understanding the game, there's so many ways to play it. But now not understanding just a broad way to make something better, but just really looking at inches and how to improve something in that way. Maybe it's the mentality about it or the actual technique, but that was a cool lesson to learn in a way that was like, okay, yeah, we got the best in the world, and we're trying to go from a bronze medal to a gold medal,
Hmm.
and that is though that seems not far away, but it is those gaps are really, really small, and you have to be thinking really, really small on how to improve.
Yeah. And speaking of those gaps of, going from a non-meddling team to a meddling team, what were some of the, what do you think separated, those medal winning teams you were part of compared to the rest of the world?
Whew. Um, there was, I mean, we could probably spend the whole time talking about that, but um, we played in Tokyo to win the gold medal. We played a very good Brazil, and we had played them many times throughout that 5 years, but the years leading up to the Olympic Games. But even if I just think from the gold to the silver, it honestly just comes down to that match, and then what are some elements that you have on that team, especially the team, and I'll just talk about the ladies but they came together um, so tightly, the 12 Olympians in Tokyo, those women. It was unbelievable, is the way they, and you mentioned Sue Enquist and when Jordan talked about that, but the way those women were able to come together through a lot of things. But I think it was based in a lot of love and gratitude for one another and respect. But there's so much talent that you had, and every team at that point is really, really talented. And so how do you come together to be like collectively stronger than like each individual part separate? I think that's one thing that was exceptional about the 12 athletes that we had in Tokyo.
Yeah. And speaking of the 12 athletes, you start with, 30 something players, beginning of the VNLs like last year, and then to
Hmm.
come down to pick your final 12, it has to be so hard and, devastating and at the same time just like life, it's just your
Hmm.
life goals being met by these players.
Yeah, it's definitely the most grueling part of the job that I had is to be able to advise the head coach and be able to come to a collective decision of which athletes that we would put on the roster. And we were able to have an official alternate for Paris. And that became a really, really important role that we were able to have 13 Olympians in Paris. But it's super tough. It's yes, it's amazing for the athletes on one side of it, but it's really, really it's I can't even describe how hard that is for the athletes that didn't make that cut. And having to make those choices, there's a lot of process that we went in. We got a lot of feedback from the athletes themselves to be able to give feedback on that process as well. Not only the process, but actually the contributors. And, if we asked them to sit in our shoes and help select that team as well. And we took that feedback on board. But that's a process that we did not take lightly. And each of those, we did many, many iterations and getting the coaching staff on the same page and then also looking at health and leading up to Paris, we had a lot of health pieces that we had to consider. And so that's not an easy thing. And I certainly wish this new staff good luck and that as they head toward LA. But yeah, that's not something that they tell you when you're getting to coach the Olympic team that you go through that. But I love that in volleyball that does come down to the coaches and the staff. Not every sport, some sports have a committee that helps
Hmm.
decide that. As hard as that decision is, I'm glad it was within our program.
All right. And now, you got to go to two Olympics, Tokyo and Paris. Eric and
Yeah.
Kavika were on, they talked about Paris was, or Tokyo was just surreal because you have this empty stadium you're playing in front of. And
Yeah.
TJ, I talked to TJ a couple of weeks ago and he goes like, Paris felt like my first Olympics because I got the whole experience. What was Tokyo like in that, pandemic environment?
Yeah, it's such a unique thing to have gone through. I actually have a really unique story. I was on the flight over, I was a close contact in COVID. So I didn't have COVID. I was healthy, but someone in within 2 rows on either side of the plane did test positive. So when I landed, within the first 24 hours or 48 hours, the Tokyo government had quarantined me. So I was away from the team. I was in my own hotel room, like really close to the Olympic Village, tested, I think, 3 times a day. I wasn't able to go to practice. I missed our first
Oh
match.
my
We
Lord.
played Argentina. Um, I was from video mic'd in with our technical coordinator, and then Marv Dumphy was there as a consultant coach, and he was going to sit in the stands, but he sat on the bench instead as a replacement for me for our first match. And so that was my first match as an Olympic coach. Um, and I was in a hotel, and that was part of it. I remember I think I took a video, but I was on FaceTime while the girls were in practice, and I was working with Micah Hancock on like some different things that she was working on with her setting. And but just through FaceTime. She would come over
Wow.
to the camera, I would talk to her, she'd go and do a couple things and then come back to the FaceTime. So it was weird. I think the whole year as we were training and preparing was weird. Certainly the Olympics being postponed a year was, I think it helped us. It helped us come together as a team a little bit. We also, Feluca was able to have her baby. She had a cute little baby and then was able to get healthy and then be part of that
Nice.
team. And I don't know that she would have been able to do that in 2020. So the postponement, I think, was the right thing for our team and, of course, to keep everyone healthy. Having no fans, there was also no distraction.
Hmm.
I think that was also in a weird way, it was really good for our squad. Paris was amazing to have people there. But having the kind of two parts of that, I don't know if we had the same environment if we brought that team from Tokyo and
Yeah.
put them in Paris, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was certainly a very unique Olympics. I thought Japan did a really good job keeping people healthy and safe, and um, they I don't know if any other country could have quite have done that without that kind of discipline that Japan offered.
Yeah. And then Paris, you got to experience the full experience. What non-volleyball moment sticks out to you from your Paris experience?
Um, so in Paris, I was in quarantine, so I was
Yep.
able to I lived in the village with the team. Um, every morning I walked down to this coffee shop and they had baguettes, of course, like little baguettes, and then coffee, and had breakfast. And that was just honestly just every morning I would just sit and sometimes by myself, sometimes with somebody else, from our staff or players would walk by, but just seeing the atmosphere in the village and having a quiet moment there, and that was one of the coolest things. It's just everyone that walked by was one of the best in the world at what they did, whether it was a video person, an athlete, a coach. Um, but that was pretty surreal, and that's from all these countries, and I really really enjoyed those moments. And we really grind when you're a staff member and like you and an athlete, but like just as a staff member at the Olympics, we're watching film, we're planning, we're getting ready for the next thing, we're really, so those cracks that we had, and usually I found those early in the mornings were really wonderful.
Yeah.
And A lot of my family was there. They had a great vacation. I learned after they went to like everything. They went to Disneyland, they went to the Eiffel Tower, they went to the Louvre. Like they were everywhere and really, really enjoyed it. But it was super fun knowing that they were there and seeing them at games and little pockets of time.
All right. And then on that Paris team, who was the joker? Who was that tension cracker on that? You just knew, all right, it's going to come from that girl, and she's just going to, she just
Yeah,
knows
well,
when
I
to say.
think yeah, Haley Washington to me is like probably the biggest personality. She's just super authentic Haley and just somebody that, I think is just really fun to be around. She's just somebody that I think is, yeah, just gonna make everyone laugh if she's got a chance
All
to. But,
right.
I think we had a lot of really fun personalities on that team.
And then, speaking of the personalities, Shannon talked about this that, for when Team Canada, after the beginning of the season, that first practice, they know they're probably not going to get much done because it's all first time everybody getting together. Was it the
Sure.
same way for, in the USA gym?
Yeah, I one of the things that I think Karch talked about this in an interview he did once, but um when the athletes are warming up, that's usually whether they're just like rolling out like or just before the official start to practice, or they're activating in a more mobile way, but that's such a nice time for them to kind of chit chat and like, they're getting their work done but such an important part when they're cooling down. They're taking care of their bodies but they're getting ready mentally and emotionally for what they're about to do that day, and
Yeah.
so part of that for sure in women's sports is that camaraderie. And I've never coached or played in a male sport, but for the women that I've worked with, that's a huge part of things is just getting to connect with the people that you're about to go to battle with.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's really fun throughout the month of May when the athletes are trickling back after their pro leagues and the time off that they have and the staff's coming in, and it's always a really, really cool thing when you have the whole group there. But yeah, it's like it's just it's a fun trickle for sure.
Nice. And now for you, is there an example or moment or improvement you've seen in an athlete you worked with that, was a breakthrough when you were working with them?
I think any athlete I've worked with, the lot has to go to them. There's a lot that a coach can influence. Um, I don't know if I can point to one thing. I was really, really grateful to have with the national team just on that is I worked with some incredible setters throughout my time and all the athletes, but I think that was the place where I was just really fortunate in this space to have not only how they were as a talent, like and how they set in their technique, but also, I think that the best part about this setting in my 8 years with the national team is how they worked together. And that was a really, really neat thing where you had one starter and then the eyes on the bench were not only my own, but the setter that was off, they had a really, really important role. And so how we worked through what those roles were, the starter, the coach, and the setter that's off. In most cases is one. I think it could be two if you changed your lineup in a
Hmm.
different way, but we always had one. Um, but that was a huge piece that I loved how we organized that. And there was really specific things like I can't see everything. Nor can I as a head coach, but I certainly not as an assistant. And so having the eyes on the bench were a big part of that. And so incorporating that in timeouts and making sure that that person spoke first. What are you seeing and how can we adjust? And what is this middle? How is this middle reacting to our quick? And all the different things that we had eyes on, but really, really being clear about the expectations of that was something that, I would be really proud of how to bring to then as I'm working with our college athletes. But that the rules are really important. And if you don't establish what they are, then you're not doing your job as an organized coach.
Yeah. And speaking of setting, setters, you've seen, over your 8 years with Team USA and traveling all over the world. Who are the few setters that really stick out as like, wow, I can just watch them set all day.
Yeah. I think there's a setter. She's a setter for Poland, Asha Wolisz. She is, to me, she's been on amazing teams. She makes Poland go from good to great. A lot of our athletes have played with her overseas in Italy, mostly is where she played with them. But she does an amazing job. I always love watching the Thailand setter. They have a few different ones, but the setters for Thailand have just a really nice rhythm to them, and they get so much out of their offense for being really small.
Mm-hmm.
But they run a lot more combinations and kind of a little bit of a flying circus than as far as system than USA. So I wouldn't necessarily take that, but I do love the creativity and the risk that is taken from their offense. So they're always really fun to watch. I think that Japan has had a couple setters over the last couple quads that have been also just really technically sound and fun to watch.
All
And
right.
then certainly our USA setters have been some of my favorites.
Yeah. And now, staying on the setting subject, as a setter, and I was a setter too, and that, last year with the college rule change of the double contact, were you a
Mhm.
fan of it, or were you like a purist, like, oh, come on?
Yeah, as far as the double contact, I'm okay to take the refs out of the judgment there. I think that if there's something that's pretty gnarly and it's a really bad double, it's gonna be at the advantage of the opponent
Mm-hmm.
anyway. And so I'm okay with that. I think it allows setters to take some risk.
Mm-hmm.
I think the proof of that rule I think will come out later if there's any difference in training, but certainly we want our athletes to take some risk with their hands as well as their platform, especially when things get out of system. But I don't think it affected negatively the college game last year at
Yeah.
all. At least not in the games that I watched or was part of. But I don't like, I never have liked when there's been a difference in refs of whether somebody's tighter or someone's looser.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of pressure there for the officials as well.
Yeah.
So I don't mind it at all.
I've grown to love it. When Matt was on, he talked about he was like, it's like a quarterback throwing a bad wobbly pass. The advantage doesn't stay with the receiver, it's to the offense. So I was like, all right, I can live with that. That's true.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good metaphor.
Yeah. And now you can have your middles do some setting.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's a setter.
Absolutely. And now for you, what has been your most significant lesson you've learned as a coach, and how has it influenced your philosophy?
Um, Honestly, it's more just life, I think, but I think I always want to be growing and learning. I think that's something as a coach, I think it also takes some pressure off that you know everything or you have to know everything in this given moment. I don't. And I hope I never do because that means I always have striving to get a little bit better. And so for me, I think I want that in my players, but I need that in myself and my staff. Um, and so if I'm gonna ask that of those that I work with, then I'm gonna lead by that too. But I'm always trying to get better. And the minute I do something well, I'm always looking to just fine tune it. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean blowing it up, but that might just mean that I want to fine tune that or try to make some improvements or upgrades. And so I think that's something that I learned from Karch, especially as somebody that is such a high performer, but is always trying to improve, and the grace that goes along with that too. But there's a grittiness to that that I really enjoy.
All right. And for you, what's been the most rewarding thing that you get from coaching?
I think just being part of a team trying to do difficult things, whether that's a team of a staff or support staff, or of course the athletes, but just trying to go through a challenging thing, and it's no day is ever the same as the last. And I think that's a really fun challenge to try to unpick the lack of what it means to be great. But there's no one recipe for it. So I
Yeah.
think that to me is really joyful. And I love being part of a unit. You're not in it in this pursuit alone. No matter what, you're always in it as a team.
All right. And over your volleyball life, who's been or who have been some of the mentors or the people that have been there for you to help you elevate and to get where you are today?
Well, certainly every staff member that I've worked with has been a great mentor to me. I've learned something from everybody that I've either worked for or worked with on every staff. And then the athletes that I worked with, especially those with the national team, learned a lot from them as what it means to be a great coach. But I can't say enough about what I learned from Karch and then the other national team staff members. Marv Dunphy and Sue Enquist are also two that are really worth mentioning of people that I think are just kind of godfathers and godmothers of this, of just coaching and teaching. But learned a ton from between Karch, Sue, and Marv. Um, I was just surrounded by incredible leaders and people that really cared a lot about people.
All right. And for those high school players, those club players, the setters specifically, what can they do to develop a higher volleyball IQ or volleyball setter IQ?
Man, there are so many resources now that are especially free,
Mm-hmm.
just by YouTubing or looking up. But I would just say just watching a lot of volleyball, and then there's even like skill breakdown and tactic breakdown of things online that you can be found for free. I know I did a ton and put a ton of things up when things were going on at COVID, especially. But there are so many resources. I think if I was 16 years old and playing club right now, I would be glued to that. You'd have to like force me to do my homework because I just didn't have that access when I was in, and like I just I think kids can soak that in, and if they're interested, there's so much to learn and go watch, and certainly get out and see some of the lot of volleyball in the States now between college and pro, in the United States. But there's so much good volleyball happening all across the world. And um, some will know every name of every good player and some won't, but that's not even that. It's just being able to watch men's volleyball, watch women's
Mm-hmm.
volleyball. It doesn't matter. It's all the same game, and there's so much to learn. And it's fun to go see the different styles. And I think for a young player to experiment with different things, whether it's different ways to serve or different footwork in their setting. And I think that is such a fun thing. But I encourage our Michigan team to go and watch volleyball whenever they can. And they're busy, kids are busy and student athletes are busy. But I think the best ones, that's a common denominator, is they're watching a lot of
All
the
right.
game.
And back in your setting days, what was your favorite set to do? Or was it to get the blocker locked up and do the dump or setting the bick? What was your, you got that perfect pass.
Yeah.
Your front
I
row,
think
what are
the
you doing?
best the best thing as a setter, in my opinion, is usually when you hear the middle blocker curse because they messed up and they read the wrong thing. Um, I won't quote what they sometimes
Mm-hmm.
say, but when you are so neutral, and that's not trying to like fake them out necessarily, but in a place where you have a cat and mouse game happening,
Mm-hmm.
and when you can be, I don't know, yeah, when you can be the better side of that, it's always a really, really good feeling as a setter. Um, I actually in college we didn't run as fast of an offense as we did with the national team, but I really enjoy running something with some speed.
Yeah.
I think if I was a setter now, I would love running some big and anything with quick and slides that are as fast as they are now.
Yeah.
But that's a very fun game for me.
All right. And for you, if we asked your Michigan players what is their least favorite drill, what do you think they'll say?
Hmm. Oh, great question. Um, I don't know. You should ask them
All
that.
right.
We keep things pretty simple, but we're always really trying to be really intentional with what our focuses are. But I do know that they like when we do shake it up a little bit and have some different things that make sure they get out of their monotony. So I think maybe less favorite drill might be than if I like kept things the same all the time and there's nothing stimulating kind of a new focus or a new intention. So I think if it was just very boring, I think they would probably find it boring.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any one activity that they may not like, but but maybe the focus of that.
All right. And then, this is really for the high school and club coaches. How do you replicate high pressure scenarios? When I talk to a couple of the Hawaii players, the guys, they talk about Milan just created chaos in his
Mhm.
practices so that when it was chaotic in game, it didn't feel that way. So for you, how do you
Sure.
replicate sort of those game point moments?
Yeah, some of them are really hard to replicate, but I think looking at how to create pressure and how to create, Milan is, creating chaos and that, but you do have to try to make the practice environment as close to what you may see in a match or game, or maybe even above that.
Right.
And so there may be, um, for serve and pass in a way that you have to create, but not only just pass, but what comes right after that. So some people may create like if you need to have some pressure with passing, just having a passing drill isn't going to do it because every time your team is passing, if you do it well, there's something that comes right after that. So
Yeah.
a lot of times replicating the pressure within a full game environment is the way to go. Sometimes I see people like serving or passing or setting. The pressure isn't just like setting into this hoop or serving and hitting that cone. It's what happens when the game is really happening. And so how do you um, I think talking with staff and trying to figure out what are you trying to achieve and how do you create it in this game environment where there's a lot of randomness and there is chaos and there's things that are happening, but how can you execute a skill when that pressure is on? But I think those are learning and understanding what your team needs and how can you fabricate that. And if you need an external cue to come in and maybe keeping score of something that's not just the outcome of the activity,
Mm-hmm.
but what is the process that you're trying to achieve so that they're really intentional about bigger things than just the point that they're trying to get. Because I think when there is a big, big moment, sometimes boiling things down to what is the process to get the point is a really good way to kind of manage that pressure. So teaching the athletes how to do that is a big part of training for pressure as well.
All right. Excellent. All right, I got a fun question for you. I had Christian Hur on a while ago, the PME guy. You've seen his TikToks everywhere.
Sure.
He had when he was with Team USA on their VNLs last year, he came up with, they started asking him, what's the easiest position in volleyball? So, Erin, what's the easiest position in volleyball, and does it
The
exist?
easiest position. I don't know. Some people might say an opposite as you're not passing.
Yeah.
So I think you're looking at I think that's a good position to make right there. You're also going to make a lot of money. You're going to get a lot of points. I think that's not easy. I don't know that there's any easy position, but that's like living large, I think, if life is an opposite.
All right. And on the tail end of that, I had Eric Shoji on, and him and Taylor have this thing, the toughest position in volleyball. So, Erin, what's the toughest position?
Hmm. I don't know. I would say setter, but I am gonna not say setter. I'm gonna go with middle. I think
Okay.
that's one that middles are that's a tough life because your attempt numbers are low. You need to approach and be available every time. You got to try to be involved in every blocking scenario. But the rewards are low for middles. So I would say that's pretty tough because you got to grind to be
Mm-hmm.
great. But there's very, very little reward sometimes. So I think that's a tough life but the great ones are, they're really, really great. So I think that's really rewarding.
Yeah, especially with so much out of system these days, those few opportunities you're running in the middle, he's got to be there, or she's got to be there, or she's got to be there for
Yeah.
the block, and not being, juked out of their shoes because now they ran for the middle and now it's coming
Yeah.
out of the back row.
Yep. And expectations are high for
Yeah,
middles. When they get set, the attack percentages are usually pretty good. So the expectations are pretty high.
yeah. So and now away from volleyball, what are some things you enjoy?
So I'm part of a huge family. I have lots of siblings and little nieces and nephews, and I love to spend time with my mom and dad, and they're big supporters of Michigan and USA and just all the things volleyball. So I love spending time with my family. I like to read. whether that's like fiction or nonfiction. I usually mix
Okay.
between the two. But I like reading and just relaxing and maybe watching a good show or hanging out with friends. But yeah, I'm not I like good music, but yeah, I don't have a ton of like crazy hobbies, but I just really love kind of relaxing and in the cracks of time when I have it.
All right. Well, Erin, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it and loved your
You're
story.
welcome.
But before I let you go, like with past guests, I look for you to share somebody in your volleyball circle that would have a good story to come on and share.
Oh, great. Tama Miyashiro.
Okay.
She was an assistant. She's the head coach of League One Saint Salt Lake City,
Yeah.
and she was assistant with me the entire time I was on the national team.
All right. Yeah, I think Jordan talked about her when she was on, just like, yes,
Oh,
this is a
good.
good person and
Yeah,
whatnot.
she's great.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much. And, good luck next season.
Thank you. Thanks for the chat.